ahead, ma'am.
Good afternoon. Thank you all so much for joining us and taking time out of your busy schedules to learn more about this grant opportunity. A typed transcript of this presentation.
Can we pause for a moment? We're just going to put everybody on mute. We're getting some comments that there's a terrible echo. Please stand by for a minute.
Okay. Check 1, 2. We understand there's a bit of an echo on some folks' phone lines. Accessibility for this webinar is available. A typed transcript of this presentation is available upon request by emailing qol@christopherreeve.org. Please indicate if large print, JAWS, or other special formats are preferred. If you have questions, please use the chat box on the bottom left of your computer screen to ask questions, and we will try to answer them all at the end of the presentations. Questions and answers received before, during, and after the webinar will be collected and posted on the website so that all applicants have access to the same information. The Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation Paralysis Resource Center is dedicated to improving the quality of life for people living with paralysis caused by spinal cord injury and other conditions through grants, information, and advocacy. The Quality of Life Grants Program provides a variety of grant opportunities that empower community nonprofits to maximize quality of life for people living with paralysis and their families through inclusion, access, independence, and opportunities for community engagement. The Quality of Life Grants programs fund nonprofits, tribal entities, and municipalities that support people living with paralysis. Quality of life grants have always been about fostering independence for people living with paralysis. The traditional Quality of Life Grants Program awards grants of up to $25,000. It has a broad eligibility, an online grant application process with 2 grant cycles per year. Since its inception in 1999, 2,837 quality of life grants totaling over $21 million have been awarded to nonprofit organizations throughout the United States and beyond. We talk about our Quality of Life Grants program as the ABCs of quality of life, which are focused on impact. We have actively achieving, bridging barriers, and caring and coping. Actively achieving grants include any kind of sport that you can imagine, recreation, leisure, employment, accessible playgrounds, and all kinds of community opportunities. Bridging barriers grants provide accessibility, advocacy, and assistive technology to solve a problem. Caring and coping grants are focused on caregiving, healthcare, consumer education, and other programs that help individuals with paralysis live and thrive in their communities. The mission of the nursing home transition grants is so that we can get as many people out of nursing homes as possible. The Paralysis Resource Center, in partnership with the Administration for Community Living, has focused on nursing home transition as part of its mission to help seniors and individuals with disabilities live in their homes, and fully participate in their communities. The goal of the Nursing Home Transition Grant Program is to increase the number of individuals living with paralysis transitioning from a nursing home into a home or community-based setting in order to increase their quality of life through improved access, self-determination, independence, opportunities to engage in the community activities, and inclusion in all aspects of society. Applicant organizations for the Nursing Home Transition Grants must be a Center for Independent Living as described in the 2014 reauthorization of the Rehabilitation Act. There will be up to 4 grants of up to $40,000 awarded to Centers for Independent Living through a competitive online grant application process accessible through the Paralysis Resource Center website, which is www.christopherreeve.org. And there is also a link that is in the presentation and you will find on the website. The timeline of the Nursing Home Transition Grant Program is as follows. The application opened on April 20th. The submission deadline is May 15th. Decisions will be announced on May 31st, and checks will be mailed on June 15th. When you go to the website, www.christopherreeve.org, you're going to want to click on Get Support, and then to the right, you'll click on Nursing Home Transition Grant. You'll see on the page that it says applications are closed and applications will open July 1st. That is for the Traditional Quality of Life Grants Program. So it is open. You're going to want to scroll down, excuse me, and you'll see application and instructions, and we have several documents to help give more information about the grant opportunity. We have application instructions and frequently asked questions, a list of application questions, the Nursing Home Transition Budget Template, and a People First language guide. And then after those, you'll see where it has click here to access the online application. If you have any questions, you can email qol@christopherreeve.org. The Nursing Home Transition Grant application has 3 parts. The first part are narrative questions, and these are designed to capture the Center for Independent Living's history of successfully facilitating individual transitions using consumer-driven practices and collaboration with the local community and government agencies. Budget information is included, and Centers for Independent Living may request up to $40,000, which is to be expended within 12 months of receipt of the award funds. The only thing that we're restricted from funding is food. We also allow you to upload supplemental documents that can be included if the Center for Independent Living feels they help to highlight capacity, need, barriers, or collaboration. And we'll talk a little bit more about that in a few slides. The allowable funded activities for the Nursing Home Transition Grant include personnel and that can include assessments, in-person visits, travel time, startup costs, which can include housing deposits and other expenses, equipment such as medical devices, assistive technology, Hoyer lifts, and adaptive equipment, supplies, including startup supplies and general home furnishing, transportation and travel, and other costs such as indirect costs, fees for filing legal documents, independent living skills training, for example, practicing taking public transportation in the community, and other items that address barriers which have not been noted in the application materials. When we talk about paralysis, we're not just talking about spinal cord injury, we're talking about functional paralysis. So that includes 5.5 million Americans. The largest percentage of those have paralysis resulting from stroke, and we also have spinal cord injury, post-polio syndrome, cerebral palsy, traumatic brain injury, multiple sclerosis, and other conditions. When we're reviewing the application, we'll be looking at several things. We want each applicant to identify the major barriers for their consumers and how these barriers will be addressed through the proposed grant activities. We don't want to specify what the barriers are. We want to learn from you and find out what your barriers are in your particular community and region. Capacity and need will also be reviewed. Applicants should describe your organization and your ability to provide long-term, in-depth, consumer-directed support throughout the transition process to individuals. Applicants should describe their relationships with other nonprofit entities, social service agencies, and government programs. We're also going to be looking at measurable outcomes and assessment. Applicants should identify what success looks like at the local level and how that will be measured. So now we would like to open it up for any questions, and we can go into the actual application questions if you think that will be helpful. One thing that that's different with this grant program than our traditional quality of life grants program is that we are asking you to identify startup costs for the program. And we also wanted to say that we're offering 4 grants at $40,000. So anyone that is not getting a grant through this program, we would encourage you to apply for a quality of life grant in the next cycle, which opens in July. So we'd love to get some questions, and I'd also like to ask my colleague Shannon if she has anything to add.
I think we'll start with the questions, and somebody did ask if we could go back to the beginning because we were moving quickly. After we complete all the chat questions, we'll have a little bit of time for audio questions, and then we'll go back to the first slide and just see if there's any questions about each slide individually. So we will go back to the beginning, and the first chat question we got said, "We do nursing home transition work. However, all our consumers we transition come from managed care organization referrals. So my question is, would we still be a good fit for this grant if we couldn't use the funds to increase the number of people with paralysis we transition? We can only transition as many consumers as we are referred to by our managed care organization partners." The target population for this grant is people with paralysis. However, we understand that there are a lot of barriers. If you don't think you can get any people with paralysis transitioned, it probably isn't a good fit, and you would want to consider applying for a quality of life grant in July that has broader eligibility and broader opportunities to do activities outside of nursing home transition. However, we don't want to discourage anybody, because if you have the capacity to connect with people in your community who are sustaining paralysis and may not have been approached about transitioning yet, this might be a good opportunity to do it. However, there's a short time period, and if you just don't have the time to do that, definitely come back to us for a quality of life grant for something for your other consumers that may not be doing nursing home transition right now. I'm just going to check the chat box to see if that made sense. And Shannon Bergman, I will get to your question as we go through it, because I'm not quite sure which part it was referring to. All right, so we're going to go on to the next question. We have been planning to submit a QOL grant application in July for an accessible community garden project. If we apply for the nursing home transition grant, may we also submit the QOL grant as planned this summer? The nursing home, this is my answer, the nursing home transition grant is a little bit different than all of our other QOL guidelines, because you are allowed to be implementing a QOL grant, applying for a QOL grant at the same time as you're applying for a nursing home transition grant. So you don't have to wait 3 cycles. If you have a grant now or you're planning to apply, you can have both NHT and a QOL grant at the same time. Okay, so I'm just scrolling down. We had the question about, can we go back to the beginning? After the whole Q&A, we will go back and give you a chance to ask questions about each slide. And I think I just answered that. If we are a current quality of life grant recipient, can we apply for this funding? The answer is yes. Okay. The next question is, what is the allowable amount of indirect costs? For QOL grants, we say 10%. However, we understand that Centers for Independent Living have an agreement with their agencies and the government. So as long as you tell us what your current agreement is, that will be the indirect cost that we allow. Is that pie graph available on your website? I don't believe we have the pie graph posted on our website. We use it in every PRC presentation though, so you will be able to see it in the PowerPoint. We'll follow up in the email with any permissions that you might need to use if you're going to reuse it, because it does have a reference for the study that was conducted that needs to be included. So I'm not sure yet if you'll be able to repost it, but we will get permissions about that and include it in the email. The next question is, if not approved for this nursing home transition grant, are we eligible to apply for your quality of life grants? Yes, we definitely encourage you to apply in July if you do not get this award. We really would love to see more applications coming in for nursing home transition, even if it's for only partial parts of the project. Obviously, you can't do as much with a $25,000 award, and our average award is $7,000 in quality of life, but we'd love to see you be able to do something. And hopefully you'll have most of your application written already and be able to just copy and paste in July. Don, I'm just going to pause and see if you have anything to add about the questions we've answered so far.
I don't think so. You're doing a wonderful job, Shannon.
Okay. We have a lot of questions. Thank you for your patience, and hopefully we're getting to some questions that multiple people have too. Okay. Our next question. If we do get a nursing home transition grant, does this mean that we cannot submit a different QOL request in July? I think this is what you said, just double checking. If you do receive an NHT grant, you may also apply for a QOL grant. The nursing home transition is different than everything else. It's the only grant that we offer that you can actually have at the same time as a QOL grant. I don't know how that helps your chances with the review committee, but you are eligible to submit. And then the second question is, we seem to be differentiating nursing home transition from QOL. So does that mean yes? Nursing home transition is one of the portfolios under our large quality of life grants program, and it is a separate grant process than our typical July and January quality of life grants. But you can have both at the same time, or you can be implementing a quality of life grant and applying for a nursing home transition grant at the same time. Just going to take a moment to scroll down to see if anybody had any comments about that answer. Okay. Donna, do you have anything to add? And it looks like our chairperson did have something to say about the pie graph. We do have a list of causes of paralysis and stats about paralysis at our website. The link is in the chat box. I'll read it out. https://www.christopherreeve.org/living-with-paralysis. Next question. It is noted that the grant is in collaboration with ACL. Does this mean this grant will have to comply with federal regulations? Specifically, will the expenses need to comply with the uniform guidance requirements? We have to do just a little research to make sure that we're thinking of the same thing when you say uniform guidance requirements, but we believe you are correct. With our quality of life grants, that means that we cannot fund food, we cannot fund new construction, and we cannot fund individuals. But we will double check and we'll follow up about that in the email. Okay. We still have lots of questions. Thank you for your patience. Hopefully this is helping. Okay. Can we use the funds for PCs or personal care assistance? Yes, definitely. That's one of the bigger barriers with transitioning people with paralysis out of nursing homes, and that could be identified as one of the uses of the award funds. Similarly, somebody asked if we can use it for rent deposits. That is allowable in the budget. You would want to put that under startup costs and describe how, you put that under startup costs and add a description and how many individuals will benefit in the budget template. But housing deposits, rent deposits, those are allowable as a one-time expense for people who are being transitioned. We are still answering questions. Donna, did you have anything to add about PCAs and housing deposits as part of the allowed award?
No, I think that those are great questions, and we want to help get some of those barriers to transition that help to eliminate the barriers so that we can get more people transitioned out of nursing homes. So if those are what's holding things back, we definitely want you to tell us about them so that we can help out with those.
And those are things that most grant awards wouldn't cover, which is why we're more understanding to that being part of the whole project. Okay, our next question is, does the grant require that the individual stay for a minimum amount of time at the nursing home? No, we have not built that requirement into the grant. That's going to be very dependent on what's needed at a local level. There's no minimum or maximum requirement of time that the individuals who benefit would have to have been at the nursing home. Next question from Joseph. Did I hear it's a rolling grant? That might have been a little bit confusing because we have a lot of different cycles for QOL, especially this year. This grant is currently open, and you can apply online by going through our website. It closes on May 15th, and we'll be reading and reviewing between May 15th and May 31st. The rolling part you might have thought you heard is because a second grant process, our traditional quality of life grants, open on July 1st. And those are open for 6 weeks, and they get reviewed a few months after that and awarded in December. This grant does close on May 15th at midnight local time. And I'm sorry if you're asking questions about my answers. There's a lot of questions in the chat box, so I will get to those questions later on down the line. Will one grant cancel out the other? Arlena asked that, and I'm not sure I understand it. If you don't mind typing in a little bit of clarification, Arlena, I'll definitely get back to that question. The next question is from Jennifer. We currently transition individuals with disabilities between the ages of 18 to 59, and after transition occurs, they receive home and community-based services via personal assistance. We would love to utilize this funding to work with people over the age of 59, but wondering if funding can be used for in-home care post-transition. We consider the period after somebody moves out of a nursing home to be part of the transition process, so that would be allowed under this grant award. It's part of what would make somebody successful in transitioning, to have regular and reliable access to caregivers they trust. So you may use the funds for personal assistance in-home for the period of time through the grant award under this funding agreement. When you talk about identifying major barriers, is strictly for people with functional paralysis who are trying to transition? No. In your application, you may tell us what you've learned about providing transition services cross-disability. We recognize how important that is and how it's a major part of the work that you're doing in the communities. This is a follow-up from Bianca regarding how we transition from manager care organization referrals. We transition about 40 to 50 people with paralysis per year currently in our program. I just want to know if this grant requires that we increase our current number of people we transition with paralysis, meaning would we have to find people beyond our referrals? That's a great clarification, Bianca. Thank you so much for that. As long as the funding supports and targets people with paralysis, you don't have to increase your current numbers. This can just supplement what you're already doing. We're going to ask you to report on how many people were transitioned as a result of the funding award. It's not going to matter if you increased by 50% or 100%. We just want to make sure that we're helping the communities get people with paralysis transitioned out of nursing homes and living in the setting of their choice. Donna, do you have anything to add?
I do not.
Okay. Maria's question is next. Transition services are also reimbursed by Medicaid. Can we still get reimbursed by Medicaid for a transition that is part of this grant? Maria, that's a great question, and I want to follow up with ACL about it. So we will definitely include that in a follow-up and on the living FAQ. Bear with me for a second while I make a note to myself. Terry's question is next. We would like to work with Craig Hospital that has transitional housing that sometimes end up in a nursing home. We want to help divert any folks at risk of going to a nursing home to have the support to live independently before they are placed. Would this type of project be fundable through this vehicle? Terry, I think that's a great example of what you can apply for in July with QOL. Because this grant is relatively new, we are only funding transition out of nursing home. Diversion is not included in this FOA, but it is allowable under QOL and is something we would love to see in July when that application opens. There's still lots of questions. Thank you for staying with us. The need to ask, can other chronic conditions include morbid obesity, which affects mobility? Okay. That's kind of in a gray area. The target is functional paralysis, which we consider injury or neurological conditions that somebody may have been born with or acquired that result in paralysis. However, we don't mind if these funds are support cross-disability as long as the target is paralysis. So I'm going to leave it at that's at a gray area, and we might follow up more about that after we discuss a little bit. But definitely, we don't want to discourage anybody from applying because anybody who's transitioned out of nursing homes, we're very excited about. We just want a significant portion to be with functional paralysis, and I don't think we've talked about morbid obesity as being in that category yet. I know that was a little confusing. The official answer is don't let it deter you, but we probably will follow up in our FAQ about it as well. Daryl has the next question. Are household items, such as beds, bedding, kitchen items allowed? Yes. Again, these are all things that we consider important to somebody successfully transitioning from a facility to a community-based setting of their choice. And that would be considered in the budget template under supplies. Any sort of startup supplies or general home furnishings that somebody would need to successfully live in the community. Pamela's question. Can this grant be used to prevent someone from having to go into a nursing facility? Example, a consumer who recently transitioned from a nursing facility, but the family is having a hard time getting the modifications done in the home, and he may have to return to the nursing facility. Those break our heart, but unfortunately this grant only supports transition because it is new. We're not opening it to diversion yet. However, if you call our information specialist, they can provide you with a list of resources and nonprofits that might support home modification. We'll post the number for our information specialists that can help link you and your consumers with those services. Okay. Alexa has the next question. Your last slide includes a web address and spells the last word nursing-home-transition-grant. Is that extra S backslash that typo in the web address or just in the PowerPoint? Oh, that's a good question, Alexa. I'm going to ask the chairperson to post the correct link again. If I switch to my desktop, I'm afraid you guys are going to see pictures of my dog, and nobody needs that right now. Please look at the bottom of the chat so the chairperson can post the correct address. We'll also include all the correct links in the email follow-up. Maria asks, is there a minimum required number of transitions? Maria, I'm actually going to go right to the application instructions because there is not a minimum requirement. And hold on one second. I know that I can read that out exactly as it stands. Here we go. This is under the impact section of application instructions. Oh wait. Nope, it's not. Bear with me one sec. I have really good language for it, but we'll definitely include it in the email so everybody knows it. Summary is different CILs are going to be able to have the capacity to do different numbers of transitions. When you're writing your application, we want to know about how many people you think you can transition that are living with paralysis, but we don't want you to emphasize reach over quality. Tell us what you can do well and tell us how many people you can realistically transition based on if you're in a rural area or an urban area, what resources you have available, what your history is. Tell us what you know works and what you know is important, and we trust you that you're going to do a good job of it. It doesn't matter if we're going to take into consideration all the different barriers. We obviously want there to be a good impact, but we're not going to penalize any applicants for only being able to do maybe 5 transitions or less than that. It really all depends on the barriers you identify and what your history of transition is. And like I said, we will make sure to include that good language that I said much better when we wrote it in the application instructions. The next question is from Maria. Do you have to apply for the full $40,000? We are in a rural area and may not need that much funding to do the transitions within a 12-month period. Jessica, that's a great question, and it kind of goes to what I was just saying. You do not need to apply for the full $40,000. Tell us what you can use and what you can do well. We don't want you to feel pressured to expand your services by 500% just because there's a grant available. You can apply for whatever you think you need, up to $40,000. Donna, anything to add?
No, actually.
All right. We have a question asking to go back to the slide with the application dates. So Donna's going to move back, and we're going to keep that up for a little bit. The application opened on April 20th. It's due on May 15th local time at midnight. So if you live in New York, that would be midnight Eastern time. If you live in California, that would be midnight Pacific time. Is that right? Mm-hmm. Okay. The decisions will be announced on or around May 31st, and awards will be mailed out on or around June 15th. Carrie's question is next. If we've already transitioned people with paralysis, can we use funds to further support their independence in their new living situation? I think for this case, that would be a better grant to apply for under our traditional QOL programs. We'd actually love to see more grants supporting people living in the community. That opens in July, and as long as you're applying to support multiple individuals, that would be considered a great QOL application. For this grant, we'd like to focus more on what's needed to help transition individuals out of a nursing facility and a few months of that support after the fact to make sure that they're in a stable, networked community. Rachel's question is next. We have, if there's a consumer who is paralyzed from traumatic brain injury, living in an apartment with minors that's not safe, would the grant be able to help someone that's already in an apartment? And I think the last question just answered that. If somebody has already transitioned out of a nursing facility and you have a lot of consumers who need community support, you want to look at our traditional quality of life grants that open in July for building up that ecosystem of programs that support people who are already living in the community. For the nursing home transition grants, the focus is going to be on individuals who are in a nursing facility that want to live in a community or home-based setting and getting them to that place with more assessments, startup costs, equipment, caregiving, everything to get past some of the barriers that are really difficult when we're looking at the system as a whole. Okay. Shanice's question. If we haven't transitioned a person with paralysis in 2016, can we still apply? Definitely. There might be a lot of reasons why you didn't have any consumers with paralysis transition in 2016 or the few years before that, but if you know there's a need and you know what the barriers are and you know what you need to do to be able to get past that and our funding could help, definitely apply. If you're looking at the screen, you should see that the direct link to the nursing home transition grant is on our website. Again, I'm not going to read it out again, but we will say it in our follow-ups. You'll have a good list of links. Can you please speak to some of the important points about reporting requirements? Sure. We don't have the complete form yet, but the reporting requirements are going to be built around those 4 points that we talked about with review criteria. We're going to ask about if the barriers were easier to overcome based on receiving this award. We're going to ask about if your capacity and need increased, and for simple outputs like the number of people transitioned or in the process of transitioning. We're going to ask about if you developed new collaborations or strengthened existing collaborations with partners as a result of these award funds. And we're going to ask about we're basically going to ask you to report on the measurable assessments that you identified in the application. In our final reports, we also give you the opportunity to submit stories and quotes and photos. And Donna, if you have any other things that are included in typical reports, please feel free to share them.
Okay, well, in typical reports, we want to find out what was accomplished, how the project played out as far as meeting those goals that were set out, numbers of individuals served, and any other kinds of statistical information that would be helpful. If there were barriers to doing the program activities that were identified, what those barriers were, and what you did to try to work around them, if you were able to do that.
And our reports, even for our high-impact grants, have between 10 and 15 questions. We try to keep them pretty short to be respectful of the time and effort that nonprofits are putting into these awards and all the other things that they're doing. We don't want you to have to write a 60-page report for this size grant. So we basically try to focus in on the most important things about outputs, outcomes, and impact without having you go overboard. Awardees will also be asked to fill out an evaluation survey from our evaluation team, but that's pretty quick. It's a rating scale of things like, did this improve collaborations, does this improve functional independence of community members? That shouldn't take too long at all. Lavesta's question. Is it proper to ask whether this grant will be renewed next year? I don't know if anybody else has been listening to everything that's going on today like I have. We hope that we always want to include transition and community-based living as part of our QOL grants. At this point, we don't know, as many people don't know, if there's going to be a special process for it, but in the future, we will always be giving out QOL grants, and we encourage CILs to apply for transition projects and community supports. And just going one step further, Lavesta, I don't know if you're referring to if grantees get renewal awards. None of our grants are given for more than a year. What we do is we usually ask grantees to wait 3 cycles after finishing implementation of award before they apply again. So we do give organizations grants if they've received them before, but we don't ever renew quality of life or nursing home transition awards for a second year automatically. Lynn's question. Without knowing the details of both grants yet, would a consumer be able to utilize both grants? We might need clarification on that, Lynn. I think utilize is confusing us. Would your consumers be able to benefit from both a quality of life grant and a nursing home transition grant? Definitely. Especially if you transitioned people with paralysis out of nursing facilities and now they're living in the community and you decide to apply for a quality of life grant to host a support group for those people, that would be an amazing way to leverage funds. But utilize confuses us a little bit because that sounds like a grant to an individual, and we don't fund individuals specifically. So feel free to clarify if I wasn't on the right track with what you were asking. Okay, Joseph asks, how does the quality of life grant differ from nursing home transition grants? Quality of life grants are awards of up to $25,000, and they are very broad. Earlier, Donna talked about actively achieving grants, bridging barriers, caring and coping. We have an open application for quality of life, and nonprofits, municipalities, tribal entities, and schools can apply for anything that they think meets those outcomes. We have grants for playgrounds, employment programs, education, sports. Donna, feel free to jump in.
Accessible playgrounds, accessible trails. We've done pool lifts at YMCAs. We funded ramps at therapeutic riding centers, adaptive saddles at therapeutic riding centers, advocacy programs, youth leadership programs, accessible transportation, assistive technology, and those would be in the bridging barriers. There's a barrier and the grant helps to bridge it. In caring and coping, we've done peer and family, well, we have a peer and family support program, but we also fund some peer networks, support groups, consumer conferences, like the Abilities Expo or Spina Bifida Conference. We've done a lot of caregiving support group or caregiving and support programs, caregiver retreats, wheelchair accessible scales at community centers, pressure mapping systems around healthcare. So a wide variety of programs.
Yep. So if you were comparing them side by side, nursing home transition grant is open now. Quality of life opens in July. Nursing home transition can be up to $40,000. Quality of life can be up to $25,000. Nursing home transition is limited in scope to nursing home transition, whereas quality of life could be anything that improves the quality of life, self-determination, and functional and independence of people living with paralysis. And there's one more that I just have in my head. Yeah.
The Nursing Home Transition Grants Program is restricted to Centers for Independent Living. Quality of life grants are open to any nonprofit that has some kind of project that will benefit people living with paralysis. Let's see.
And we can come up with a chart, too, in the follow-up to show the different scopes of our grants that we've given out this year. Michael asks, I'm assuming that people must be in nursing homes as opposed to our helping people stay out of them. Is that correct? Yes, because this is new and being run in a short time frame, we're focused on transition. Diversion is not part of this grant. However, if you want to apply for a QOL grant in July, we'd definitely love to see applications that support multiple consumers in diversion. Alexa's question, is there a minimum nursing facility stay if you combine these funds with money follows the person. We have not identified any minimum nursing home stay. We don't want you to go out of compliance with another program, but our awards can be used at any point that a person has been living in a nursing home. Arias asked, is it a one-time use? And I think we need a little bit more clarification on that. Whether you're talking about, can it only be used for one person, or can you only get the grant one time? At this point, we don't renew grants. You can apply after waiting out a few cycles. But definitely give us more clarification if that doesn't answer it. Ed's question. Must the person being assisted be in a nursing home, or can it be an adult family home, group home, etc.? Oh, we haven't thought about that, Ed. We might need to loop back, but my initial gut reaction is if there's a person with paralysis that is living in an institution, let's loop back. We'll loop back with you, Ed, and we'll make sure to include that in the follow-up email. Okay, Celeste's question. Is amputation considered functional paralysis? Answer that.
Okay. According to our definition, amputee is not considered functional paralysis because there's a component of a neurological condition. So I think if you had somebody who is an amputee, I would think that I wouldn't want to decline services, but I would encourage you to have other people that do have functional paralysis as that will be served by this grant.
Yep. And we do have a partnership with the Amputee Coalition, and our information specialists and their information specialists do work closely with each other. It's just that one little technical definition that puts them on the outside of functional paralysis as defined under our agreement. All right, Arias is asking, could we repeat about diversion criteria? And Arias, I want to make sure that it's totally clear. So we're definitely going to include that in the follow-up, and I'm just going to say a little bit about it. For this grant, it's a short time period and it's a new grant. So we're just focusing on transitioning people out of nursing home facilities into community-based settings. So we would not be funding young adults who are transitioning out of public school into work opportunities. And we would not be funding individuals who are already in a home or community-based setting and are at risk for being moved into a nursing home. We're currently only funding projects that support a target population of people with paralysis and other disabilities that might be able to be affected by these grant funds that are in a nursing facility that want to live in a home or community-based setting. And again, I know that that's probably still confusing, so we're going to have a very clear paragraph in the follow-up about the difference and the criteria for this grant. Alexa asks, can the grant funding be used to develop and pilot either an enhanced nursing home outreach program aimed at recruiting people in nursing homes for transition and providing pre-transition services, or to develop a comprehensive independent living skills training program for pre- and post-transition services? Specifically, does the funding have to be used for individual services for a person with paralysis, or can it be used to enhance the general independent living skills curriculum?
Well, the goal of this grants program is to get as many people living with paralysis out of nursing homes as possible. So we really want the focus to be on those services to make that happen. And again, that's because this is a very
focused program with the scope, but I love the idea of the independent skills living curriculum and the outreach plan, and those are definitely more appropriate for a typical quality of life grant, which opens in July and goes up to $25,000. So we would love to see your organization apply for something like that in the regular processes. Can we use the funds to help pay for utilities deposits?
Yes.
In the proposal, that was Stacy's question, and this is Bianca's. In the proposal, one of the questions asks, please explain how the NHT grant will expand or enhance the currently funded services. If we receive this funding, do we need to increase or expand our services? Or if our current transition program already hits the benchmarks and outcomes the NHT is seeking, can this grant funding be used to support the program as it exists? Or can funding only be put towards enhancing and expanding the program? All right, I understand that other question now, and that does sound like there's a very specific requirement that you have to grow the program. But we understand that this is $40,000, and the main goal is to get people out of nursing homes into the community. So focus on the quality of services. You don't have to expand your program. We would love to see if that's the case. We want to know if this is going to allow you to do something that you couldn't do before or do it better than you could do before. But you don't have to. You can focus on people who are getting transitioned rather than how much your program is growing as a result of the grant. We just want to know that information so that we can get an understanding of how impactful the grant is going to be to your organization. Donna, anything to add?
No.
Is assisted living considered a community-based setting? I think we need clarification from Celeste on that. If you mean assisted living in a home or community-based setting with personal caregivers, or if you mean an assisted living facility. Please feel free to add in your chat with clarification. This grant aims to help people get out of institutions and live in a home or community-based setting of their choice. So we're really thinking moving into an apartment or moving back into a home with their family, not moving into a group home or a step-down care facility. Okay, Joseph's question. Can we supplement nursing home transition grants with existing IL funding and or MFP funding? Yes, it's encouraged. We'd love you to leverage it. Ignacio's question. We are across the street from Rancho Los Angeles National Rehab Hospital. It is not a nursing home, but there are numerous patients with recent paralysis who need transition services. Would these hospital patients be eligible for this grant funds? I think we have to go back and clarify, and that's going to be in the paragraph about diversion services. We do just need to check back on that because you guys are coming up with great questions and great scenarios, and I'd much rather answer them now than answer them after you've written an application and knock you out for it. So we will follow up about all the criteria about nursing homes, diversion, hospitals, all of that. And I'm sorry I couldn't answer that right now, Ignacio. Okay, Alexa's question was already answered. All right, sorry. So Arias, so for diversion, is it clear we will be asked to apply for a QOL? All right, that's a great question, Arias. We are not sending out reminders to everybody. If you apply for this grant, we're probably not going to follow up directly with you and say, hey, apply for this QOL. But it comes up so quickly after the grant that we will be advertising it on social media and sending out our general press releases. So you can come right back to the same website, and it's actually the same link to log in. And in July, you can use the password and login you set up to fill out the nursing home transition form, and you'll just see that there's a new process that you can click on. So it should be pretty easy for you to come right back. But we won't, if you don't hear from us, you should definitely try and come back. Because we're not going to be emailing everybody personally and saying, you should apply for quality of life. Just look for it on our website around July. You can bookmark the link when you log in, and you can always go right back to it and see which grant is open. All right, I'm excited to announce that we have a short link for the nursing home transition grant, and that is https://www.christopherreeve.org/NHT, nursing home transition. Daryl asks, can this grant be used to move people out of assisted living facilities or only nursing homes? Again, Daryl, I want to answer it, but we're going to get all of that clarification so that we don't give anybody any misinformation. I'm pretty sure the answer is yes, but we're going to confirm. Kimberly asks, are there any guidelines regarding when to utilize these funds? For example, if the person is eligible for Medicaid waiver, but we can't find a contractor who can work with Medicaid funds, could we use these funds to build the ramp to allow them to go home, even though there are other federal funds they could technically use? I think that speaks to one of the big barriers with nursing home transition, because as people are waiting and waiting and waiting for finding the right contractor and getting everything in order, I think that would definitely be okay. The main point of this grant is to cut through some of those barriers that have been set up through the systems and get people into their homes and communities. So that example of building, making the modifications to multiple consumers' homes as they're waiting for waivers to come through would be allowable. But we will follow up on that to confirm. Donna, anything to add?
No, I think that's perfect, and I think we want to know what the barriers are, and if that's what the barriers are, then we want you to use the funds for that.
And this is great because this isn't necessarily what we immediately thought of as some of the barriers, but that's part of the reason why we want to provide this funding, is because there's all these little pebbles in the road that turn into boulders. And we want to make sure that this award helps you move those out of the way and get people to where they want to be and where they've decided they want to live. Karen asks, everyone referred to us for our NHT program must have Medicaid. Not everyone has Medicaid. Many people leave the nursing facility without what they need for quality of life just to get out of the nursing facility. Can we use this grant for non-Medicaid people? Can this be used for home modifications? Yes and yes. Arius asks, for the personal care assistant expense, is it a one-time use? Okay. We're going to follow up with that. The way we're thinking of it is that any personal care assistant, any startup costs that it is kind of for those first few months as somebody is settling out of the nursing home and then working towards sustainability, where they can manage the expenses that are associated with their care through personal funds or waivers. So we're kind of thinking in terms of it can be used for maybe the first payment or the first few payments until the person is able to get everything else in order, because we know that that's usually what keeps them from being able to stay in the community. But we're going to follow up and confirm about that and make it more clear. And we've got the last two questions, and then we'll briefly open the phone for audio after answering these. And if we don't have any audio questions, we'll just quickly go back to the beginning and see if anybody has any specific questions about some of the first few slides, since we moved quickly at the beginning. So Joseph's question is, can we use the $40,000 for personnel already working on transitioning? And I believe that we agreed yes. We just want you to explain how that will help you improve your services or why that's needed or what the barriers were for that. You can also use it to promote somebody from part-time to full-time so that they can do more assessments, or to create more positions or expand the amount of staff that are working on nursing home transition. Donna, anything to add?
Nope.
The last question in the chat box is from Angelina. Can we use the money to pay for first and last month rent? Yes. We've been referring to it as the first month, but we would consider that the initial housing deposit, because a lot of apartments do require first and last month. Essentially, we don't want the grant to be used to pay for one person's rent for the entire 12 months, but that initial starting housing deposit, where most people don't have $2,000 saved, if that's all part of the first housing deposit, the first and last month rent would be allowable. Okay, our operator is going to tell us a little bit about the phone line, just in case there are any audio questions.
Thank you. If you'd like to ask a question on the phone line, you may do so by pressing *1 on your telephone keypad. If you're using a speakerphone, please make sure your mute function is turned off to allow your signal to reach our equipment. A voice prompt on the phone line will indicate when your line is open. Once again, that's *1 to signal. We'll go to our first questioner now. Caller, your line is open. Please check your mute button.
Yes. Can you hear me, Donna and Janet?
Yes.
Hello?
We can.
My name is Horacio Esparza, and I'm calling from Chicago. And my question is, are we going to be requiring Social Security?
I don't know if I understand the question.
Well, the reason I'm asking you because there are some people who don't have documents and might be in nursing homes, and they might like to move out of nursing.
That is not something that we have as a requirement.
We're not going to be asking for individuals' names that you transitioned. We're just going to be asking for summary data, so we wouldn't need to know whether individuals had Social Security documents or not.
All right. Thank you.
Well.
And we'll go to our next questioner now.
Hi, this is Doris from Virginia, and I am here with Alexa, just to know, so this is in reference to clarification to our question. I heard you say that an applicant could bid for staff to augment your ability to be able to get people out of nursing homes, and so what the question about outreach and or pre-transition services was intending to get at is that, like, the Money Follows the Person program only allows you to help somebody starting within 2 months of their actual transition date, whereas in order to help somebody get out, there are many things that have to be done prior to that. And we are a center for independent living in an urban area, and there are many nursing homes here, but because of the various barriers presented by the lack of rental assistance and the lack of all the problems that are going on with the Medicaid program, we really need to be able to work with people. And right now we've been transitioning maybe 4 or 5 people a year. Yeah. And we want to be able to increase our reach. And the same kind of thing with the Independent Living Skills Training Program. If we can start getting people into the process by utilizing an Independent Living Skills Training Program for transition, not for general purposes, but for transition with the basic skills. Is that something that is within the purview of this transition grant, or are you telling us that we need to go to the quality of life or barriers?
That's a really good question. Here's how I'm going to frame it. If the application is written so that you're talking about people that you know have expressed an interest in transitioning out of nursing facilities and that you can't get to them until it's 2 months prior to transition, and this will allow you to not only reach them, but also at the same time increase outreach. We need to bring them to the point where they're ready
to get into the Money Follows the Person program, for example, and that 2 months goes very quick. So sometimes on an average, this has been indicated in other studies. On an average, it takes 6 to 9 months to prepare people to come out, and this grant might augment our ability to be able to do that, even if we had a part-time person who could augment our staff, because right now we really only have one staff member who is able to dedicate some time to working with people in nursing homes. And we have a lot of nursing homes.
When it's described as that, it sounds like this sounds okay to me. And I'm just going to clarify by saying we didn't want to fund pure outreach programs where it would be kind of a year of figuring out if there are people in the community who want to transition. That's the only reason why the outreach part was confusing me. But anything that cuts through that systematic barrier to be able to reach the people and invest the time in them so that they can successfully transition, we would like to see in applications. Does that make sense, Donna?
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Thank you.
I was being caught up on language. Sorry about that, everybody. Thank you so much for that question, and I think that's really helpful for us and for the other applicants. Thank you.
As a reminder, if you would like to ask a question, that is star 1. We'll go to our next caller.
Hi. Is your online application screen reader friendly, do you know?
I believe so.
We have had there have been a few. We haven't ever had a problem with the application screen. We have had people in the past who needed a special copy of the budget template. So if you do encounter any problems with either, we're happy to provide a Word document that is reader friendly, and we can manually input it if you're able to fill it out through that.
Oh, that'd be great. Are there text boxes? Do you know?
In the application?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, that would be a problem. Okay.
Okay, that's great to know. So we'll work with our communications team to put a reader-friendly version up on the website too for this process.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
But you can, if you want to get started, you can definitely send an email to qol@christopherreeve.org, just reminding us to get a Word version out to you.
Right.
Okay.
We can absolutely provide the questions in a Word format so that you don't have to deal with text boxes, if that's helpful.
Okay. Great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
And just in case anybody is listening from a rural area, that also goes for rural applicants. If you're having difficulty accessing the internet and you can't get into the application successfully, we're happy to accept a limited amount of paper applications to manually input because of those barriers.
There are no other questions on the phone lines.
All right, so we're just going to, I have the slide up, and you can either chat or ask a phone question. Does anybody have questions about the slide that's up right now concerning the mission of the Paralysis Resource Center and the Quality of Life Grants Program that's part of that organization?
And again, that is star 1 if you have a question. And we do have a question over the phone lines. One moment, please.
Okay, we'll take that quickly.
Caller, your line is open. You may be on mute.
Yes, excuse me, this is me again, Horacio, and now I have a question about the quality of life funding. Could we apply probably for vehicle modification under that grant, or that would not apply?
If that's something that a consumer needs that will help them live successfully and independently in the community, I would say yes.
Yeah, actually in the past we had that program in our center, and it was very successful, and we had a long waiting list when we ran out of the funding that we had, providing with hands control and driving training rehab.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's
Thank you.
something definitely, yeah, we definitely would welcome proposals for that.
Well, I'm going to be checking on that. Thank you.
Okay.
Lavesta had a chat question. She asked in Word format there would be a character limit. Most of the questions we ask for a character limit of 10,000 characters just because it tends to be easier for reviewers to read all the applications. I believe 10,000 characters is at least 2 pages. We can't enforce a character limit on Word, but we would definitely prefer if most of the responses are kept to under 2 pages. And then the second question is, and that's responses for each question. You definitely don't have to write that much. Sometimes you can say exactly what you need in a paragraph or 2.
Yes, less is more.
Yes, there's a lot to read. The next question is from Arius. I don't think we answered this very well. Did you answer about how long a grant cycle is? Once you get the check award, we give you 13 months, essentially 1 year to spend the money, and then a month to write the report.
Right.
There are some circumstances where people can request extensions by formally emailing us, and that's usually because of a natural disaster. Like in Louisiana, when there was a lot of flooding, our grantees needed a little extra time to finish giving out their awards.
Right, and we are very aware that things happen sometimes, and delays are sometimes inevitable. So just let us know what's going on, and we'll be happy to find out about what's going on and give you an extension if that's needed.
The slide that's up right now is just explaining the quality of life grants, and we talked about the difference between these and nursing home transition. Quality of life funds all sorts of nonprofits, tribal entities, municipalities that support people living with paralysis, and it's awards of up to $25,000. The 2 pictures are from some of our grantees doing sports and fitness and adaptive sailing. Were there any questions about this slide?
Again, that is star 1 if you have a question. There are no questions at this time.
Okay. This grant explains a little bit more about quality of life grants, which opened in July. To date, we've given out over $21 million, and that's since 1999. People are asking if they can get a copy of the PowerPoint. We will be sending up a follow-up email to everybody who registered for the webinar with the PowerPoint, links, and some of the answers to those questions that we were a little bit unclear about. Okay. The ABCs refer to the Quality of Life program, and that's another way to explain that you can pretty much propose anything that you know is going to help your organization, as opposed to nursing home transition, which is limited in scope to nursing home transition. Any questions about this? Okay, I'm going to go ahead and move to the next slide. This is the mission of the Nursing Home Transition Grants. It's on the website and all the materials, and it speaks to some of those questions about what we can really do. As long as the main goal is increasing the number of individuals with paralysis that are able to live in a home or community-based setting, that's really what we're hoping to accomplish with this award. Any questions?
Again, that is star 1 if you have a question. There are no questions at this time.
Okay. Only centers for independent living that are authorized under the 2014 Reauthorization Rehabilitation Act are eligible. If there is anybody on the line that's just a nonprofit that supports people with paralysis, we definitely want to see you in July. So the CILs will only be submitting this award against other CILs. If there are no questions, I'll move on to the next slide.
There are no questions at this time.
This is our contact information. Again, the short link is christopherreeve.org/getsupport/NHT. And the nursing home transition grants, there will be 4 awards of up to $40,000. The application link is available on the website, and the process is open to CILs. When everybody's ready, I can go ahead and move on if no one has questions. Okay, I'm going to move on to the timeline. This was open for a while, but once again, applications are already open, due on May 15th at midnight local time, and we'll be making the decisions in those 2 weeks before the month ends. Any other questions?
Again, that is star 1 if you have a question. There are no questions at this time.
Okay. And I know that this slide is the one that has a lot going on. This is a screenshot of the christopherreeve.org grant program page. If you use the short link, you should be able to get right past it and go to the nursing home transition grant. However, if you just type in Christopher Reeve grants and you end up on this page, you're going to want to look for the white box on the right-hand side of the screen and click on nursing home transition grant. So you're getting all of the application materials for that process. If you just typed in www.christopherreeve.org, you would look at the top bar, which is white with bold text, starting with living with paralysis. The next tab after that is get support. And we have an orange arrow pointing to that because if you're going straight to the home page, you'd want to click on get support and then go to the white box that says nursing home transition grant. And it looks like people are in the chat box asking to see the pie graph. We will get to that in just a few slides. If there aren't any questions about how to navigate our website, I'll move to the next page that shows the bottom of the nursing home transition grant page.
As a reminder, that is star 1 if you have a question.
Okay, so once you've clicked on Get Support on the home page or gone right to the grants page and clicked on Nursing Home Transition Grant, you'll be taken to the Nursing Home Transition Grant page. This shows a screenshot of the bottom of that, and that's where you're going to find the links to the instructions and to apply. So scroll all the way down after you've read the landing page, and if you want to read more about the detailed instructions, you can click on this link, Application Instructions. There's also a PDF of application questions. Like I said, we will add the Word document with reader accessibility. There's a budget template, which you'll need to download, fill out in Excel, and then upload with your application. Again, we'll be happy to provide an accessible format. Our People First Language Guide is a link to another page on our website that talks about centering the person. And finally, the most important link is the one with this orange arrow. That takes you to a separate web page, which is what houses our online application. You'll see a login screen. You can create a login or sign in if you've applied before, and once you do that, you'll be able to fill out the application in the browser or send it to us if you need an accessible format. I'll pause for questions.
Again, that is star 1 if you would like to ask a question.
There's a chat question from Catherine. Should support letters come from MDHHS, whom we contract with for our NHT program, or other community organizations that we have utilized to support nursing facility participants' transition efforts? The letters of support are not required, and we don't want to put a burden on the applicants. So if you can get those, it would be fantastic to see, but if you don't have time to get them, it's okay. Even having community organizations would be wonderful to see what types of partnerships you're working with. Joseph also asks, do attachments count as part of the character limits? No, they don't. And can't remember it off the top of my head, but I believe we have something like a 10 or 15 megabyte limit for the attachments, but as long as you combine them into one PDF, you should be able to get a decent packet in. If you are having trouble submitting an attachment that's too big, let us know and we can work with our software vendor to try to fix that. Okay, Ed is leaving. Thank you, Ed. Michelle says, how is the grant paid out, upfront or monthly? We send you one check around June, and you get the whole amount to use throughout the year. And then you report on it after a year of implementing how you spent the money. So one single check. Any other, okay. Any other questions for this slide? And just want to point out, when you click on that bottom link, click here to access the online application. It will take you to another browser. Don't be scared, it's not spam. It's our software vendor, and it actually makes it much easier to use than everybody emailing everything and going back. So you'll be able to go back to your saved application once you do it in that web browser. Okay, I'm going to move on to the next slide. This is just a little bit to prep you for what the application looks like. You can always download that PDF, but there's 3 basic sections. The first section has narrative questions, and that's where you're really going to say most of what we need to know. The second section just makes life a lot easier for us. When everybody submits something on the same budget template, it makes it easier to figure out exactly what people are asking for rather than hunting through the narrative questions. And then the optional supplemental documents are those letters of support if you choose to include them. Any other questions on this slide?
As a reminder, that is *1 if you have a question. There are no questions at this time.
And this is a great slide to refer to once you get your PowerPoints. This shows the 6 budget categories on the budget template. Personnel, for staff either to do assessments, in-person visits, things like that. Startup costs for things like housing deposits. Equipment, which we're really referring to medical and adaptive equipment in that budget line. Things like Hoyer lifts that might be needed to make an apartment more accessible, or durable medical devices. Supplies would be something that's not medical, that's needed for somebody to live successfully in a new apartment or home-based setting. Transportation and travel, just want to call this out. That could be for staff members to travel, or it could be for bus fares for doing independent living skills training as somebody gets to know a new neighborhood. So that does have some broad possibilities in that line. And then other costs can include indirect costs, but also might be anything that hasn't already been called out in the budget. Okay. And then this is the pie chart that we were asking about. Did anybody have any questions about the pie chart or the data in it?
Again, that is *1 if you have a question. We'll go to our next caller.
Can you just tell the blind people on the line what the pie chart's about?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. Thank you for reminding me.
No problem.
Okay, so this chart is titled, over 5.5 million Americans are living with functional paralysis, because that's the target population. And a lot of times we forget just how many people sustain paralysis based on different conditions. The largest part of the pie chart is a result of stroke, people who sustain paralysis as a result of stroke. It's about 29% based on our 2009 study. Yeah, I'm pretty sure the study is 2009. We have the citation. So at that point, they did a phone survey, and based on what they found, they came up with these numbers. At the time, and I'm sure it's grown now, 1,608,000 people sustained paralysis due to stroke, and that's 29% of that 5.5 million. The second largest group is spinal cord injury. 1,275,000, about 23%. After that came multiple sclerosis, 939,000, about 17%. And then it starts to dip a little bit more. The next category is other, which is 9%, and that was 526,000. Below that, cerebral palsy, 7%, about 412,000. And then post-polio syndrome, which I think affects our aging population a lot, that was 272,000. And the two smallest groups were neurofibromatosis at 212,000 or 4%, and traumatic brain injury at 242,000, 4%.
Right, thank you.
Thanks for reminding us to describe it.
No problem.
There are no other questions in queue.
Great. We did go over the review criteria. This is what we're really going to be looking for applicants to emphasize in their applications. Identifying the barriers, which are going to be unique across the country and at different CILs. We really want to celebrate what makes your community unique, and that's not going to be the same across the country. The capacity and need, this is kind of balanced. Again, you might have the capacity and the need in an urban area to reach hundreds of people, but that's going to be very different in a rural area. We're not comparing apples to oranges. We really just want to know about your CIL and what's needed there, and what you're able to do based on the different geography, the different consumers that you serve, all those unique characteristics. We'd like to know about collaboration because we really believe that that helps these efforts become sustainable, especially if you are working with the Housing Authority, with community organizations, with other disability organizations. That's all really helpful to see and helps us understand the impact you can make. And then obviously with any grant award, we just want to know what you're going to do and how you're going to measure it, what those activities, outcomes, and outputs are. That doesn't have to look the same for everybody. Let us know what systems you already have in place and what you'll be using so you don't have to create a whole new tool just to report on this grant. Any questions about the review criteria?
Again, that is star one if you have a question. There are no questions at this time.
Great. I'm just going to go right back to our contact info. These are our personal emails, but the best way to get to us is by emailing qol@christopherreeve.org. It's a little bit easier to sort out and make sure it gets answered right away. But you are welcome to follow up with us at these emails. And you will be seeing a PowerPoint and an FAQ and links and some of those specific answers shortly, probably early next week. Any other questions on chat or phone?
There are no questions over the phone lines.
Thank you so much for staying with us. I think there's still 60 people on the line, and that was a haul. So I really appreciate your interest, your patience, and truly everything that you're doing, because for all of us here at Reeve, we know just how important transition is and just how few resources there are out there to get to as many people who don't want to be living in a facility. So you guys are my heroes, and I can't wait to start reading more about what you're doing at your CILs. Donna, anything else?
I just wanted to echo Shannon's comments. Thank you all so much. We're so excited about this grant opportunity and seeing what we can learn from you all, what your challenges, the barriers are, and how we might be able to help overcome them and get more people out of nursing homes and living independently in the setting that they choose. So thank you so much.
Yep. If there's anything else you need to do that we can help you with through the process, please feel free to reach out. Good luck.
Thank you.
Oh, that's just thank yous. I don't think there's any other questions in chat. Okay.
All right.
You're welcome to everybody who's saying thank you on chat.
This does conclude today's conference call. Thank you for your participation. You may now disconnect.